have with me, luckily, gladly, once again in the studio at Golden Days Radio, Harry Haythorne, dancer, vaudevillian, ballet master, artistic director. He's done the lot. Welcome back, Harry.
It's great to be back. Thank you for asking me.
It's been such fun making the programs, but we've got all heaps more. Now, we left you the last program at the Scottish Ballet.
That's right.
What were you doing there?
I was assistant artistic director, and I was also danced character roles from time to time. That was a very exciting time because Scotland for some years had not had a ballet company. There had been one or two attempts, but somehow or other the idea had not caught on, and then there came this time when the Arts Council in Great Britain said, we've got too many companies in London, and what we must do is get some of them out outside. And Scotland was interested to take a company, and so they took the Western Theatre Ballet, the company that I had been working with as assistant artistic director, and they took that to Scotland and founded the company on it, so that once we got there, we became the Scottish Ballet, and then started to take in Scottish dancers into the company. We already had some Scottish dancers. For example, our ballet master happened to be a Scot, and bit by bit I organised that we have a school attached to the company, or rather special classes for young students, and bit by bit the company became more and more Scottish.
Oh, lovely. Not wearing the kilt all the time, I hope.
No, but we did wear the kilt in one ballet, which was not a Scottish ballet. It was a ballet called La Sylphide, which is a famous ballet from the 19th century, made by a Danish choreographer, August Bournonville. I know that's a French-sounding name because his parentage were French, but he was actually born in Denmark. And he is one of the great choreographers from the 19th century. One of the ballets that he made was this ballet called La Sylphide, about a man who is about to be married, and he gets haunted by a sylph from the forest, and he falls in love with her and jilts his bride, but in the process he upsets a local witch called Madge, and she's an evil old bag who decides that she's going to get her revenge on him because he's upset her, and so she arranges that he will kill the sylph. The sylph, in effect, is immortal, but the old witch impregnates a scarf with a special poison which will turn the sylph into a human being, because that's what he says. He wants the sylph to become human so he can love her. But of course he hasn't bargained for the fact that when she has the scarf thrown on her and becomes human, she's several thousand years old, and of course she shrivels up and dies. She doesn't actually do that on the stage, but that's the basis of the idea. And then the witch ends up killing the hero, the man who's jilted his bride and gone off with his sylph. So this ballet was very, very popular, and the whole thing was set in Scotland with kilts a-whirl, and partly on the strength of that ballet we were invited to come to Australia on a tour. So the company came to Australia and toured all of the capital cities except Brisbane. We didn't go to Brisbane, and then we went to New Zealand.
Approximately what year are we looking at here?
So we're now looking at 1974.
Oh, right.
And with us as a guest artist was Dame Margot Fontaine, and she danced the sylph in La Sylphide, and I danced the wicked witch Madge.
You were Madge. Sounds terrific. I think we should have a bit of a music break now. That was the witch scene from La Sylphide, played by the Royal Danish Orchestra, and my guest, Harry Haythorne, danced the Mad Witch Madge. I don't know whether she was mad, but her name was Madge, and I could see as he was playing the muscles, but Harry was dancing it all over again, sitting here quietly beside me.
Well, that was the scene in which the evil old bag goes around the cauldron in which she's cooking up a soup of frogs and snakes and various things like that in order to poison the scarf and so kill the witch. But it was a great honour to be on the same stage and in the same production with Margot Fontaine. She was a beautiful lady, a lovely lady. At that time, she was late in her career, but she could still do some astounding things, marvellous things, and was very sympathetic to work with, very interested in everything we did. The ballet master and I had to give her a class every day. Now, most ballet dancers have a class at least 5 times a week, some 6 times a week. Very few want to have a lesson 7 times a week. But with Dame Margot, we had to find a studio on the Sundays wherever we were, so that either the ballet master or I would give her a lesson. I don't think that giving her a lesson is really what we did. We sort of said, well, shall we do some of these? And she said, yes, well, let's do some of those. I can't really claim that I trained her in any way, but she needed to keep the muscles turning over, and it's much easier to work with somebody, to have some music there and have somebody there, and usually her partner would come, and he would work with her as well, and sometimes some of the other ballerinas would come in, because we had our own Scottish ballerinas who alternated. In that, she was very generous. We had 2 ballets in the same program, La Sylphide, which is a long short ballet, or a short long ballet, according to which way you look at it, and then we had another ballet, then just one act of the Nutcracker to fill up the program, and Margot danced either the lead in one or the other, and on the alternate night one of our ballerinas danced the opposite role.
Right. And this was touring in New Zealand?
Touring first of all in Australia,
yes,
and then to New Zealand. A very, very successful tour, and at that time it was coming very much to a head as far as I personally was concerned, that I had to make up my mind whether I was going to end my career in Britain or whether I was going to come home to Australia. I had been wanting to come back to Australia for a number of years, at least 7 or 8 years before it actually happened, and all the time I tried to arrange some job that I could come back to, but it didn't seem to be possible. And then in the end I thought, oh well, I'll come back to Australia anyway. So I made up my mind that I was going to come back, whether there was a job or not.
And this was after the tour and finished?
Well, it was sort of during the tour, really, but I had to go back and finish my contract, obviously, with the Scottish company, and then at the end of the year I thought I would return to Australia. There seemed to be a monumental lack of interest in my return to Australia.
Great silence, was there?
Yes, and I had applied for a job as the artistic director of the Queensland Ballet, but I heard nothing, and it seemed to me that it wasn't going to happen. And then one day in London, a very famous choreographer, one I'd worked with before, a man called Walter Gore, said, oh, I'm going out to Australia soon. I'm going to be the artistic director of the Queensland Ballet. And so I thought, oh, well, that's paid to that. He's much more famous than I am, so he will end up as the director. And so in order to get a little bit of extra money, I had been offered a job in Israel. I'd been there several times, but this time it was to stay for a much longer period and work with one of the ballet companies there and one of the big dance schools there. And then one day the director of the ballet company, or the dance company rather, said, I've just had a telegram for you from Scotland, and they're asking that you telephone them, that it's urgent. So I thought, well, I'd better telephone back to Scotland and find out what it's about. And the administrator of the company said, I've taken the liberty of opening a telegram for you, which has come from Australia, saying that if you want the job with the Queensland Ballet, it's yours. And so I actually, in the end, did have a job to come back to. It was very interesting. I enjoyed very much coming back. I came back, I remember, at Christmas time, and I came, I think, on must have been Christmas Eve, that one of the flight came through Singapore, and everybody who wanted to go back to Australia had obviously already gone, and there were only about 8 of us on the plane, on this enormous plane, and we were being force-fed. We came back really rather like the geese that make pâté de foie gras, we were sort of given about 8 Christmas dinners between Singapore and Adelaide. However, I went to Queensland, which I enjoyed very much because I had been there during the war in the Air Force, and it was very interesting to have a small company which was very much under my direction. It had been started by a man called Charles Listener, who had retired, and I took over from him. Why the negotiations with Walter Gore came to naught, I don't know. And I never bothered to try and find out. I thought it would be indiscreet.
Yes.
So I started this small company, or at least I took on this small company, and we toured throughout Queensland, which for 4 years I was there.
For 4 years, goodness.
Yes, it was very, very interesting because the distances are vast, as you can imagine. Only Western Australia has larger distances within the state, and there are. To my surprise, there are a great number of really quite large centres. They've become even larger nowadays, and but it was in some ways very primitive. I mean, there was one time when we were going from Brisbane to Mount Isa, and the bus broke down right out in the middle of nowhere, and luckily just by a pub, and I'm sure I didn't arrange that, but the pub, believe it or not, didn't have a telephone. Quite extraordinary. And they said, oh, there's a man in the bar will take you to telephone. So I went into the bar, and this man said, oh, you want to go to telephone? I said, yes. He said, all right, I'll take you, come outside. So outside, and I thought I was going to get into a car, but we got into a plane. And he flew me off back to his station, and so that I could have the telephone. But so I could telephone Mount Isa and say, we're stuck, we've got to wait for the public bus that was coming through. We'll have to wait for that, which was not till the next day. But it was interesting because he took me hedge hopping. I think he thought, oh, well, I'll frighten the life out of this one. But I was not so easily frightened. And I actually enjoyed the flight to and from the pub, where we all had to stay overnight.
What an incredible story for all that for a telephone. Nowadays, when you compare that,
yes,
it's almost impossible. So there you are, hedge hopping, you've got the phone, and you're sitting in the bus waiting for the next bus. Well, sleeping in the pub, I guess.
Well, that's more. Oh, yes, absolutely. But we just had to pile in and sleep wherever we could because the pub was not geared to have a company. We weren't a large company, but we were sort of 20 people with our stage crew and everything. It was really quite a number to put up. But the whole of the experience in Queensland was really very, very interesting. But eventually I had an opportunity to start the dance course for the Queensland University of Technology.
Oh, wow.
It was, at that time, had a different name, but that's what it's become. Mm-hmm. And so I started that dance course, and that meant that I had to leave touring with the ballet company and concentrate on the work at the university. But it did give me an opportunity to work with the Queensland Opera, and although I don't regard myself as a choreographer, from time to time I've choreographed things, and certainly when I was at Sadler's Wells I choreographed the ballets in a number of operas, one of which I re-choreographed again for the Queensland Opera, and that was Hansel and Gretel, which is an absolutely beautiful opera, especially at Christmas time for children.
So we'll listen to a piece of music from this opera?
Yes.
Yes. And that was music from Hansel and Gretel, sung by Bridget Fassbender and Lucia Pop.
Yes, immediately following that beautiful duet, there is the ballet, which is for the 14 angels who come down from heaven and protect the children. It's beautiful music. It doesn't really lend itself to a spectacular ballet in the sense of spectacular steps, because it must be very calm and very, but beautiful to arrange. And I thoroughly enjoyed that particular job.
And when did that finish, or where did you go from there?
Oh, from there I went to New Zealand. All the time that I was working in Queensland, I was getting calls from time to time to go to different places. I, for instance, worked with the Australian Ballet School for a period. I went back to Scotland once. I went another time to Hong Kong, to work with the ballet company there, and then I went to work with the ballet company in Ireland. So my holidays were paid for in between my work, which was good. And of course I love travelling anyway.
Well, yes, and you would be hard to push whether it was holiday in Scotland or holidaying in Australia, depending on which direction you were heading and the time of the year, I suppose.
Well, unfortunately, the way it seems to work between the northern and southern hemisphere is that when it's holiday period and summer in the place where you are, you end up travelling into winter. So you have to like the cold weather.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, now, we haven't got an awful lot of time, but you, the New Zealand, and we want to talk about a bit more. I think I'd like to ask you to come back in again.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I think your listeners might be quite fed up with me by now. But if you think they can cope, then I'm very happy to come back.
Right. Well, let's do it then. Look forward to having you back. Thank you, Harry Haythorne.